We're going to start right now with Ryan and Greg's talk on The Web is Vulnerable, XSS Defense on the BattleFront. So ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Ryan and Greg.
Hello, my name is Greg, and well, I am a bad guy. I really like hacking, and you know, I do it professionally, so that's okay. I do it for a Microsoft corporation. If you are doing this for a government, that's okay too. And the problem is that the name of the game in our industry is really build it and fix it. For an example, you have a Linus Torvalds, and whenever he says a four-letter word, everyone talks about it on Slashdot. So I thought I no longer want to be a bad guy. I really would like to do something better. And but my manager said, Greg, you are a bad guy. You are a hacker. You really should stay with the dumps. And they didn't mean like what they meant was really crash dumps or log dumps, which was the stuff that I was doing. And I thought, hey, what if I do this? If I, instead of hacking, if I try to find other bad guys exploiting XSS. So XSS is an issue that's still on the top 3 of OWASP top 10 list after 15 years. And it's known to be very prevalent, but it is not well known to be exploited very wide. And we know that majority of applications are vulnerable. So now I had this idea that, I could use all of these data sources to find the XSS attacks. The problem is that it's not that easy. It starts with privacy, really, to use the data sources that you see on this list. In most cases, you have to start with proper notice and obtaining proper user consent. That's a lot of work, and I wish I could say, hey, right now, all the data with URLs that are untrusted, that goes through, for example, Microsoft online properties, is scanned for XSS attacks. That's not true. It will take a lot of time, a lot of effort to make this a reality. So today, what I will show you is just a small window into the evil world of XSS attacks. Now, how small it is, we don't really know yet, but it gives us some ideas of what's happening out there. So even though that is small window, it was still a big data that I had to go through. It was hundreds of terabytes of raw data that translated into tens of terabytes of URLs. And well, if you have friends in high places, you might get access to even bigger data sets. And if you manage to do this, perhaps you give us insight into how this problem looks like on a global scale. Because we made the method that we used available publicly. There is this project on GitHub that I created recently, Detect XSS Lib, and it's not exactly the tool that I used, but it's pretty much the same methodology. It's a general purpose library written in C. You can read more about it on GitHub. There is a command line tool that comes with it. If you have a list of URLs, you just run them through the command line tool. It will do some first detection, then some sort of deduplication, some simple post-processing, and it will output you the attacks that were detected. And also, we put some test set that was created on the base of the attack that we detected. It is sanitized, so we are not disclosing any websites that we found to be vulnerable. So what did I find? Like, the first thing that I found were proof of concepts, which was about 90% of all the detections. And proof of concept is basically usually just a pop-up window that shows up in a web application. Like the previous one, this one in different language, one with like very primitive hacking attempt. And what's really behind those proof of concepts, there are two things. There is malicious intent or benign intent. Now, malicious intent, these are just byproducts of somebody probing, for an example, your website. But in most cases, we think that it's just a benign intent, because basically security researchers, there are a lot of security researchers who like to find cross-site scripting issues, and then they like to talk about it, or they like to be rewarded for finding XSS issues and disclosing them responsibly, or sometimes they just get a public credit, like you see down there. I am here, for an example. Now, those who don't like public credit, those attackers, and don't like rewards maybe, or maybe they are too rich, they go a step further. They want to, they create defacement, so they inject content that by itself is not really malicious, it just changes the content on the website, and about 5% of our detections were these kinds of attacks. Now, many of those people, they prefer to remain anonymous, so we cannot know who they are really, because they're anonymous. What it looks like is there is a URL with all the contents usually squeezed in the URL, and in most cases this URL is delivered through a URL shortening service. So all you see in Twitter or Facebook is just the shortened URL that doesn't show anything, and then you click on it, and then you, for an example, see like this kind of defaced website, which clearly shows that the attacker has some sense of humor, or you see the attackers they just like to take over somebody's web pages. But in many cases, when we have seen some more kind of reasonable looking attacks, they were affecting either government websites, in which case it was just some sort of activism, or media websites, in which case people just wanted to brag about it or wish somebody happy birthday, or basically just do this for fun. Now, attackers who possess some more advanced scripting skills, they go a step further and they want to steal cookies. So cookie stealing is the first type of attack, probably the simplest, involved cross-site scripting, where attacker actually gains some advantage on the user. So this is how it looks like. So let's say I'm the bad guy. First, user logs into a valid website and receives a cookie from the server that is used later to identify the user. Now, attacker sends email with a link including cross-site scripting, malicious script. The script gets reflected from the server, and then it runs in the user's browser. Now the cookie gets sent to another server where Cookie Monster can eat the cookie, or before Cookie Monster eats the cookie, attacker can log in and grab the cookie for himself and then use it to impersonate the user. Now, the actions that can be done with impersonating are different, depends on the web application, but clearly that gives attackers some opportunities. And we have seen many examples of the attacks that were using this cookie stealing technique with different kinds of short scripts through different kinds of URLs. For an example, this httpz.ru website, it's well known to be malicious if you are using any sort of web reputation service, like URL reputation service, like Internet Explorer Smart Screen. You will not be able to even go there because it's just blocked as being malicious. But some of the websites that were used for cookie storing were kind of interesting. Like here we have a case where the target server, it was a hacked server of a funeral home. Now, you must give the bad guys credit for being smart, since funeral homes have little chance of going out of business. It's a perfect place to keep your cookies for eternity, stolen cookies. Now, the next slightly more complicated kind of attack we have seen, it's a typical in-session phishing. That's how it's often called. And here it's slightly different. So first, users logs into a website using his own credentials, and then attacker sends email with URL containing cross-site scripting vulnerability. Then the script renders a login page that looks exactly the same as the original page, but it's completely rendered by the script, controlled by the malicious script. So now when user enters credentials, the credentials end up on some server managed by clueless minions. And then the attacker just logs into the server and grabs the credentials, and that's the game over. Now, in this case, since the rendering script usually has to be a little bit more complex, it's served from another server that's usually also hacked, and in general setup of this attack, it requires more work. We have seen a few of these attacks, I would say more than 10, and the targets were either the email providers or financial institutions. In both cases, the price that what attacker can get, it's pretty high. And the fake login pages were rendered with very high detail. They were localized. Those attacks were really prepared by professionals. Now, the most advanced attacks we have seen involved data stealing. It's pretty much the same attack like in session phishing, where more complicated script runs in user browser. But in this time, the script interacts with the specific web application. For an example, if it's an email service, it can parse the list of contacts or email attachments or even emails and just steal data by uploading them to a server. Now, we have seen very complicated scripts that were exceeding tens of kilobytes in size, even more than 100 kilobytes in size. And some of those scripts even had leftover comments of how nice it were much easier to analyze. And also the scripts that were doing this, they were doing basically everything that they could, stealing all the data that they had access to in a given web application, and then they were even cleaning up after doing their work. So here I have some example of the script. Now, we were able to do this analysis for 6 months in a consistent way, for 2 years overall. And so far we have seen example of at least one vulnerable server for almost every top-level domain. We've seen it even for every single country, for most country-specific top-level domains. When it comes to attack intensity, first we noticed that it's pretty much uniform except for Asia, and then we realized that basically our data set was not very representative for Asia, so we suspect that we have a data skew, and Asia is it should be at least as bad as Europe and Americas. For Europe, it was pretty much uniform. The attack intensity overlaps with basically number of domains or websites that are present in a given country. Over time, the attacks are pretty consistent. The July numbers are again around 2,000 unique instances of attacks and over 200 vulnerable servers. By server type, it's the same as a server market share. So there's really nothing. There's no correlation between a vulnerable website and the type of server that serves the website. By platform, it's pretty much the same, except we try to dig deeper in the version of the platform, and it appears that the newer versions are slightly better, so are slightly less vulnerable. Now we'll see if it holds in the future. So basically, when at first I looked at the data and I gathered all the statistics, I thought to myself that, whoa, finally my plan to take over the world is taking shape. Oh. But then, I am the bad guy, but I'm not that bad. And I thought, Greg, you have to think about the children. You need to change this for the future. And then, so I contacted Ryan and I showed him this, and Ryan said, hey, we are doing a lot of things in this area, and now right now he will tell you basically what can be done about this to change this present state.
All right, so sticking with the theme from the beginning, now we're kind of shifting to the fix it, Felix stage, right? So what can you do about fixing XSS? So you got to start off by saying, yes, get with your developers, fix your code, contextual output encoding and escaping. Yes, we all know that, right? What I'm talking about is not mutually exclusive. These are things that you should be doing in production to mitigate things as you find vulnerabilities, right? So think about this through an operational security perspective. On the left, obviously these are things taken from my book. It is at the bookstore, so shameless plug if you want to pick that up. Also Arsenal tomorrow, there's a presentation at 12:20 and then demos in the afternoon. So I'm gonna go really fast right now to throw a lot of stuff at you. If you're interested or have more questions, please come to Arsenal tomorrow. So number one, find your vulns, right? You wanna make sure that you know where these problems are. So finding these, you should have some specific goals in mind. Number one is minimizing the time to fix. So once you know you have a problem, let's say you're monitoring logs and you see people testing proof of concept code, you should say, oh crap, we got to do something about this, right? So now you're on the clock. How quickly can you put something in place to mitigate that? The other one is attack surface reduction, right? Unless you're in the code, fixing it at the code level, you're not going to get 100% security. But for operational security, that maybe isn't your goal, right? Perfection. We're looking at mitigating as best we can. So a couple of things to look at here is using automated tools, number one, because we're not using source code analysis tools, because again, we're in production. But you can run a lot of these tools at your application to identify vulnerabilities. Here we're using Arachne, good open source scanner, very, very good. The URL we're looking at is on the modsecurity.org site. We have an XSS test page that I'll show you in a second. On the left-hand side is where you can export all this data. So if we know we have a vulnerability, you can say, okay, let's go grab this XML data. You get the format, and it's in a nice parsable format, so you can run a tool against it. This is included in the OWASP mod security core rule set. We have a whole utility directory where you can auto-convert XML data from Arachne and a couple other scanners. And it creates mod security rules for you. So kind of a virtual patching aspect. These rules will actually kind of correlate the injection point and then check with the OWASP mod security core rule set to see if it saw any cross-site scripting payloads. The other thing to look at is leveraging the browser, right? In cross-site scripting, you have both the server side and the client side that are both kind of participating in this problem, right? The application's not tracking the user supplied data and knowing how to handle it, but really it doesn't become executable and cause problems until it makes it into the browser. So if you shift your focus back to the browser and see what browser vendors are doing, we can leverage that. So taking this to the next step, those of you who are familiar with Content Security Policy, CSP. Show of hands, is anybody attempting to do this right now? Okay, not a lot of hands. That's because looking at CSP and implementing it, retrofitting your site to do that, it's like eating an elephant. So as opposed to looking at your entire site and it's a bit overwhelming, break it down into biteable, bite-sized pieces, one vuln at a time. So a good thing is to do scanning, find where you're vulnerable, go to those apps, and then targeted implement CSP. So it's what we're showing here from a mod security perspective. If you've never seen the rules, this doesn't mean too much, but you can define only on this particular URL. We know we have a problem, so let's go ahead and send down a CS policy to the browser when anybody's accessing this page. So from a browser point of view, if you haven't really seen how this works back and forth with CSP, working in the browser, this is a screenshot of the web page that reflects back the payload. At the bottom, just the developer tools, right? So you can see what's happening behind the scenes. So when the attacker sent that payload, coming back in the response, this is what mod security told the headers to add. You see content security policy, and we've defined essentially what is data and what is code. So now the browser has a better understanding of what it should and should not execute. So when it gets that, the browser would now say, oh, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to execute that code. It triggers events locally. You could see them in the console log, but it would not execute that code. What's also nice about CSP is you have the report URI. So things that happen browser side, now they can report back and tell the server, hey, there was a client side problem. So now you're, from a cross-site scripting perspective, you're going from, I see an inbound payload that kind of looks like cross-site scripting to, oh crap, this executed in the browser. Right? That's a whole different threat level of different clients you might need to look into. Another possibility here, this is kind of a newer integration that we have, is the idea of conditionally pushing down JavaScript sandboxes. This is good for those browsers that aren't yet CSP compliant, or if it's real tough for you to extract out inline JavaScript to make it compliant. So this is using a tool called Mental.js, so the reference down there at the bottom. Mod security rules again, throwing this at you. If you've never seen it, doesn't mean much, but we're using an operator called regex substitution, where on the fly we can modify the HTML going to the client and do whatever we want with it. So in this case, same exact page we saw before. It goes up and comes back. So here's a big difference between CSP and a JavaScript sandbox. The sandbox isn't preventing JavaScript execution. It's just running it within a sandbox. So even though it said show me document.cookie, in the sandbox it's undefined. So they can't get access to it, right? And you can see on the other side down the bottom, that's the code that mod security added in on the fly. All right, automating virtual patching. All that stuff we just showed is great. You should do it, but it's manual, right? You have to run tools, export stuff, create rules. So trying to figure out how to make this faster and use an integration. So I'm just using a kind of an architecture flow to show you the concept here. This is using a different aspect of Arachne Scanner. It has an RPC-based service, so it's headless. You can run this across a whole fleet of servers. This is using Mod Security's Lua API to talk with that RPC service and exchange data back and forth, right? So you have a regular client using your application. Mod Security monitors that and fires off Lua, and it extracts out data from the user. What was the URL, request method, what were the parameters? And then it goes across RPC and it talks to your Arachne server. It says, Arachne, dispatch a job. I want you to go QA one vector, right? We're not talking about crawling the entire site. We're saying, go check this and look for cross-site scripting. So it gives us back a token report so we can go fetch it later, so we know which report we're looking at for that URL, and then Arachne starts scanning. So this is all asynchronous, and then we can check back in at a later time, and it says, uh-oh, yes, there's cross-site scripting in a parameter called player. Now that we know that, Mod Security can now take action, right? You've confirmed it with a vulnerability scanner, and now when a user is coming to access that page, what do? What we just showed, push mental.js. All of that is automated. You don't have to do anything. Okay, some other things to look at are what else are browsers doing, right? They have different filters that they're doing within the browser itself, XSS filter being one of them. So there's some different examples. Of course, you have Internet Explorer. On the far left, you have NoScript. A lot of you are probably using that. So how is it handling these payloads? NoScript actually does it on the inbound when it's sending the request. But it applies a bunch of regexes. That's not all it does, but that's part of what it does. It generates an alert banner at the top, and in the console, it'll actually show you the regex that matched. So that's useful information for us if we want to beef up our filters. So we can save that off. We'll come back to that. And then Internet Explorer basically does the same thing. Now, there's some other things built around it, but it generates an alert. It has its own regex filters. So we can take those filters from both those different browser-side tools and take those and say, okay, let's put that server-side in Mod Security. So we can have better inbound filtering, doing things that browsers would have done as well. So we took those, we updated the Mod Security core rule set. Those are there today. You can go check those out. Got demo. Okay, you got to test these out, all these filters, just to see how good they are, right? So Roberto Salgado, he actually has a talk, I think tomorrow, about SQL injection here. I suggest you go check it out. We do have some demos. You can go check them out. This is live. We actually just released this yesterday. Nobody has beat it yet, so there's a challenge. See if you can. It's using the filters we just showed you, but also pushing mental.js. Your goal is you have to execute JavaScript and access one of 3 DOM elements. If you're successful, you let us know. There's links on there, and we'll get you a prize. Some methodology that we see is pretty consistent across all different attack categories. When attackers find an injection point, they start to iterate, and they figure out how can I get around what that filtering is, right? Using different encodings, different characters. They want to figure out a way to have functionally equivalent code, but get around the filters you have. So knowing this, they're knocking at the door, they're knocking at the door, they're knocking at the door, they're not in yet. You don't want to wait until they magically get one that works, right? You want to learn. So that's what we want to do here, is using Bayesian. So you can do some training, right? This has been going on for a long time in the spamming world with email. We can take that same concept. The idea is leveraging your blacklist, regex, negative security filters to train your Bayesian classifier. So as data comes in, it's an email address. That's not an attack. Let's train it as ham. An attack comes in, that's flagged by our filters, train it as ham. The theory of operation is then when you get to an unknown sample, something that didn't match your regex, maybe they use some different encoding, right? So you want to get around that so you can flag on it. This will show you that flagged it even though it bypassed all our filters. So you got to do multiple layers, all right? The last section here to talk about is doing client side, right? Letting it get inside the DOM and doing some other analysis there. This is using the data modification again. In this case, we're pushing down some extra JavaScript code that will tripwire different events. If they happen browser side, we want to know about it. So you can see some different tripwire stuff there in the upper right. If that happens, it does an XHR and posts data back so we know about it. So it's kind of like CSP to a certain extent, but you can modify it how you want. Now this works. However, you're exposing to the client what you're doing. Right? So this may catch some initial people doing proof of concept, but if they're really monitoring what's happening underneath the hood, they'll see this and they can evade it. So the idea was, can we do this server side? So this is where we bring up the idea of using Phantom.js, which is a WebKit client. It's headless. In this instance, you have the data come in, the data goes out, we don't mess with it, but then we use the Lua API and we make a copy of that response data that was sent to the browser and we hand it off server side to Phantom.js. It evaluates that HTML and then it can generate alerts just as if it was in the browser. So that's cool that you get that kind of insight. Again, you're moving from something that looks like an attack to something that executed in the browser. So that's better fidelity for you. All right, we can skip this one. It's just another example of XSS Auditor that we can see the same messages. And the last one, as I'm wrapping up, is if you have a real aggressive person, depending on what they're doing, you can also hook them with beef. For those of you who know the browser exploit framework, they send in a cross-site scripting attack, we modify the response, you hook them, right, gets in their browser. I see some people chuckling, saying, ah, yes, the evil stuff. All right, so we'll turn it back over to Greg.
Once you fix it, it's kind of interesting. We saw how people handled it from different countries. Again, simple messages for Americans. Italians, we block your IP with a smile. Germans, Ordnung muss sein, like everything you guys described. Romanians, very professional. Hackers did it. French, they don't like English. Netherlands, very colorful. So situation is pretty bad. This is how it looks like when you take Alexa top-end domains and you overlap with our detections, which you should remember is just a small window. And we have this very, very rough estimate how prevalent XSS attacks are. And what should we do about this? It's like there's a lot of things to do. We should be just doing our work, doesn't matter whether you're a bad guy or good guy, just one server at a time. Maybe we will change this. Now, many people contributed to this presentation. We would like to acknowledge them. And reminder, please scan your card, give feedback. And thank you for choosing XSS to fulfill your cybersecurity needs.